So I do kind of want to go back a little bit here. I kind of skipped over this concept. When we talked about gender roles, there was also in most Native American groups we have a third gender. They called them two spirits. They used to be called bardosh, but it's not. It's kind of an out of date term. Two spirits could have been female or male. Um, Biologically taking on roles of the opposite sex. So it may have been a male basically doing the gender roles as a female. Now, this gets interesting when we have conversations about egalitarianism and set gender roles and what that looks like in terms of power. Many times these two spirits had high social esteem. So, again, I know here in this kind of in the Tehachapi area, uh, the last chief was actually a two spirit. Um, and in the Chumash group over in Santa Barbara, the two spirits were seen as very, very high. They were kind of in that chiefdom, just below chief level social status as well. And again, what's fascinating again is that in today's United States culture, we're having these conversations around gender and what it means to be third gender and rights as an individual of third gender. These egalitarian groups integrated them in. So your book points out, and this is quite fascinating. Your book points out that gender roles were defined by sex, but then it talks about two spirits being involved. So in reality, there's some murky area there in terms of conversation and what that looks like. All right, so back on to kind of the economy and material culture, technology. Tents in the summer, they were basically windbreaks, very small, not very substantial. Again, it was very hot in this area. In the winter, you had substantial subterranean homes, so we would be partially digging into the ground and building kind of more foundation, permanent structures in the winter. And again, in winter, they didn't really move around much. They pretty much stayed local in that home, and they had to entertain themselves. Travel was by foot, canoe in the rivers and lakes when they were thawed. And by foot, again, in the winter, they used snowshoes made out of different skins, kind of weaved together. But other than that, the northernmost people probably use dog sleds as well when we get closer to kind of the Arctic tundra area. In terms of clothing, caribou and moose tunics and leggings and moccasins were all worn by everybody pretty much year round. You would wear more than that in the winter, and obviously less if it got really, really hot. Women had tattoos in this group as well. It doesn't seem that men did. You had stone tools, and oops, I put boon, that should say bone, sorry. Bone and wood tools were very, very common and popular with this group. And then they also had naturally occurring copper that they would cold hammer into ornaments and symbolic goods. So religion, this is fascinating. I have a lot of my focus in cultural anthropology has been religion and ideology. I studied again among the Maya, and I was looking at their kind of traditional religious beliefs and if they still practice them or not. So I'm always fascinated by different groups, belief systems, and cosmology. Remember the difference between cosmology and religion? Cosmology refers to creation stories, especially in your book, the way that the author breaks it up. So if you see the word cosmology, you can pretty much bet that this is the group's creation story of where they came from. And the Cree, again, have an interesting one, and you're going to want to really focus on that. In terms of the subarctics group of kind of how they saw things ideologically, worldview, and religion, they believe that everything has power, and it comes from the universe. And really, even your book likens it to the idea of the force. Some people have more power than others, and it's based on talent and kind of hard work. Doing good meant more power. Doing evil meant less. So this would be a way of social control, right? If you believe that you gained power through doing good, you're most likely going to do good. And again, the group would have re-emphasized these things through their inner workings with each other. And the other thing to think about here is power. What does it mean? Remember, when we talk about power in anthropology, we're either focused on the power to do, basically as an individual, set goals, do those things. Again, if my goal is to go out and gather a basket full of berries, that's the power to do. The power over usually requires the power over someone. Now, these groups of people are not going to have the power over even animals necessarily. Okay, so I don't know necessarily that this power is talking about the power over, but it's talking about more of an energy. I would use it more as an energy. And again, the force, being in tune with that energy, is important. I think that's why the comparison to the force in Star Wars is here, is that it's more of an energy. And if you're in tune to it, you kind of have maybe special power. And it's not special power over people, it's special power to kind of do interesting things within nature. Animism is the idea that everything has spirits, and we're talking about rock formations, trees, animals. So spirits are surrounded everywhere, and they're going to have similar power. They also talk about spirit helpers for the vision quests for people or individuals going on their rites of passage through the puberty ceremony as a vision quest. Humans thanked animals for being hunted. So if you did not kind of do this prayer or thanking the animal for being hunted, you're not in tune with this whole spirit process and power religious idea. One of the things in your book it talks about is that animals loved humans, and that's why they let them hunt them. And fascinating again that there is some almost reverence to killing off the animals because of that. There is no idea of dominion here, that that any one great spirit sent these animals down for us to conquer, domesticate, or take over. This is definitely a reverence to nature and interconnectedness to nature rather than a separation from nature. And this definitely forms a major portion of their worldview, and some taboos, right? Killing other humans is a taboo among the subarctic. Your book definitely talks about them warring, but then it says that they were skilled warriors. However, war was not seen as a quality way of solving problems or done very often. So we don't know necessarily if war was introduced over these 400 years or if it was part of their deal. Now, again, I could be speaking as a utopianist, like saying that, oh, these groups never warred prior, but did they every once in a while? Did it happen? I'm sure. Remember, everything is on a spectrum. However, groups with egalitarian ideals tended to not focus on conflict. They tended to focus on cooperation. Shamans and witchcraft were definitely part of this kind of evil spirit. They believed that shamans could actually cast war. And a lot of times if somebody fell ill, they might say that a shaman had cast kind of an evil spirit, dark spirit, onto that individual, and that another shaman would return that to the other tribe and kind of have this more symbolic version of war rather than have a whole conflict and total annihilation. So the other thing that shamans did, there was a divination process, which is kind of tapping into that power, tapping into the spirit world, that might have some healing aspects as well. And divination, I think, is a vocabulary term that you're going to want to kind of know on that guided lesson. Subarctic peoples today, laws in the 1950s and 70s really helped subarctic people out. I mean, at least to a certain degree, right? They recognized their land, they recognized them as people, but they did start a more formal process into the westernization aspect, which was they helped them build schools, cultural centers. They did a lot of things. And your book points out that even native schools are now teaching native ways and language rather than just the westernization process, which was probably originally what was happening in the 1950s and 70s, a form of kind of assimilation and acculturation. But now there is a return. The subarctic people they're numerous. There's a lot of them. They're organized. And there is a dramatic push by the elders to return to these older ways of doing things. They see this out of touch, kind of global environmental nature's destruction as a European white man cause, and moved even the native groups out of their right way to live, the correct way to live in their mind. And so the elders, especially you'll see this in the video that I've assigned for the week, really are trying to reflect on the processes that change their culture areas, that change their culture, and try to return some of these concepts and just overall behavior back to the way that they were. So they have, in a sense, maintained a large portion of their identity in this area. But again, there's a lot of what has happened is the material culture and westernization has pushed to change that a bit. A lot of the men and women have gone to Western jobs, whether it be in the timber industry or other industries in the area, and it's wage labor. And again, the tough part here is that if you are a economic determinist or the idea that a modes of production really impacts the rest of your life, if you're going off and working these 40 to 60 hour work weeks, it's going to change how you view the world. It's going to change how you interact with nature. You start to see nature as just part of your stomping ground rather than something that's providing for you, because you're going to work, you're earning a wage, and now that wage is used to purchase things. It disconnects you from nature. So this is part of the tough process that maybe these individuals are going to syncretize the ideas that maybe you have some overall religious return, ideological worldview return to this power source and nature being an intricate part of life, and not only intricate but determinate, mixed in with some Western thought of work, labor, and how to kind of live on a daily basis. And again, I would say that this was my experience in the Mayan world as well, is that people are able to distinguish kind of between the two, and actually not really even distinguish, but just live both lives at the same time. But these are some of the issues that the people are living with today, and really making that connection between how detrimental our subsistence strategies, our modes of productions are to the rest of our worldview is important. Karl Marx would have said that they're everything, that the worldview and everything after that comes from the economic subsistence strategies. And I kind of tend to believe that they're more integrated in a more feedback loop kind of way, and not just to kind of determinate one or the other. But definitely looking at those processes, that the disconnection that is caused by, even in our daily life, where we wake up to an alarm clock to get to work, and then we sit in traffic. We disconnect ourselves from not only the environment and nature that actually could provide plenty of food for us, but we disconnect ourselves from other individuals as well. It's not even a social kind of experiment when I get in my car and I'm now in traffic and I complain that every other driver is a bad driver, even though they're complaining that every other driver is a bad driver, which is me. So yeah, we have these disconnects that are all interrelated into our modes of production and our economic means, and really, so this wage labor portion is going to have to be worked out in terms of the subarctic peoples returning to their way of life, because returning to their way of life is literally walking on the earth and recognizing that the earth is providing, and in a wage labor system, it basically isolates you as the individual, as the provider, rather than the earth. It disconnects you from that process. So positive and negatives, these people are organizing in more thorough, kind of culturally traditional ways, and it's important for them to kind of go back to that. And they're teaching it in schools, which is valuable. The Cree, these are the things you're going to want to focus on: language, cosmology, politics, social organization, life cycle and marriage, economics, material culture, religion, medicine, art, and recreation. So these are the areas you're going to want to look at on your own for this week. Okay? Thanks. Have a great week.